Hi there, my name is Ryan, and today I want to share with you my personal development collection. Now, as you'll see, many of these things relate to Tony Robbins, but a little later in the video, you'll see some other personal development authors and speakers that I'm sure you'll recognize as well. For me, this all began when I was 12 years old and discovered a dusty set of cassette tapes at a thrift store. Now, I didn't even have a cassette player, but once I found one, it really ignited within me this joy and learning personal development that's continued to this day. You'll see that I have on this top shelf of my bookcase many of the authors and speakers that have been most known in the industry. I have signed first editions by many of them, including this one called Awaken the Giant Within, which you can see Tony inscribed to a fan, likely at an early bookstore signing. Now, these aren't particularly rare or unique, but this next one really is. It was inscribed to someone named Dr. W. Edwards Deming, a famous management author and theorist in the 1980s. You can see here Tony made out a nice long inscription to him. Now, if you're familiar with CANI, or constant never-ending improvement, as Tony says, this is one of the theories that I think Dr. Deming likely contributed to Tony's work. This next book is an advanced uncorrected proof copy of Unlimited Power. You can see that in the table of contents, all the page numbers are 0, and at the top right of each page, each one is hand numbered. So this was very much a draft copy of the book and is something that's extraordinarily rare. I actually consider this to be sort of the crown jewel of my collection. I would never trade it or sell it for the world. Now, this is actually an early Russian edition of one of Tony's books. I have several of these early language translations. Tony's books have been translated to languages around the world. These are all first edition copies of Tony's books, including some of the more recent ones like Unshakable, The Path, and his newest, Life Force. These are a couple of early event tickets from 1991, and you can see that they're still intact. I try to keep them nice and together in these cases. On the back side is a map of where the venue was and a number to which you needed to RSVP because there weren't any websites in those days. This is a luncheon invitation to an event in 1993 in Rochester, New York. You can see that it says you're invited to a lunch with Anthony Robbins, and Tony has signed it there for a fan. This is an early participant manual from Fear into Power, Tony's signature event back in the day. You can see that the participant wrote that it was a 97-degree day in Cleveland. They said, "I did it. I walked across a 12-foot bed of hot coals, July 15th, 1988. Tony has signed it here." And I love that they've written at the top, "I always thought I could do anything. Now I know that I can." Something pretty powerful. You can see a lot of the participants' notes throughout the manual as well, and it's really fun to see what their takeaways were from the event at that time. This is a 2001 NBA Finals ticket to the Los Angeles Lakers. Tony signed it here for a fan. Here's a coin that was given to Platinum Partner Lions. Nice little memento. This is another coin that has Tony's foundational principle of the triad on it, which is pretty cool. This is a pair of Tony's size 16 shoes that he signed. These are usually auctioned for charity at his event, Unleash the Power Within. Before internet video became a thing, these are a couple of video DVDs that were sent out in the mail for Life Revolution and later Unleash the Power Within. This is a press kit for Shallow Hal. You'll see more from that movie a little later in the video. This is a gift that was given to Platinum Partners for an event that was held in Moscow, Russia. You can see here it's a beautiful set of Russian nesting dolls that was given to those participants. Next up, we have the earliest magazine I can find that Tony was in. It's a Life magazine, and you'll see here that it talks about the charismatic kid, and there's Tony leading a seminar, I believe, at his Del Mar Castle. There's several of the participants walking on fire. There's Tony in front of his home with his limo. There at the bottom is a very early picture of Tony with his son Jarek, who I've actually had the pleasure of meeting, and just a lot of cool history there. And hey, look, there's a cigarette ad, so it's been quite a while since cigarette ads were in magazines. This is the participants giving each other a back massage, which is something that I think you'll see in events even today. And just a lot of really neat history. This is a timeline that the author of the article kind of takes us through the night of the firewalk. and I think it's 2 a.m. before they're back in the ballroom ending the night. So really, really cool to see that history of how the event flowed back in the day. This is an East-West journal from the following month. You can see here it's also from 1985. And there's Tony leading a fire walk. And this is all in black and white, but some great photos in here showing him with participants doing a board break. Now, these are some more modern magazines that Tony has been in. A lot of Success Magazine, Fortune, Money. Here's another Inc. I think I have just about every magazine that Tony has been in, let's say in the last 5 years or so, which has been quite a few. But it's great to see Tony's advice, in these magazines, and how all of it is still very relevant even today. These are old Robbins research reports that were sent out almost like a newsletter to people who had attended Tony's events, I believe through the early 1990s. These are actually pretty hard to find. It took me a few years to find these. But again, something very cool to see what was being discussed back in the early 90s. Next up is a natural history magazine from 1955. Now, someone listed this on eBay, said that it had to do with Tony Robbins, and I wasn't sure why. It turns out this magazine is from the Walt Disney Library at Disney Studios in California. It's signed here by someone named Charles Shows, who checked it out. Turns out that's Tony's grandfather, who was one of the creators of the Yogi Bear cartoons back in the day. Now, these are some of my manuals. This is my Unleash the Power Within, Date with Destiny manual, which have a lot of personal meaning to me, but also some older manuals like this, Power to Influence. This one from Unleash the Power Within. It has E3 at the top of it. For some reason, I have 3 copies of it. We've got a Wealth Mastery manual here. These are all hardbound manuals from Life and Wealth Mastery. We've got the Power to Influence again in a hardbound form. We've got the Unlimited Power Home Study course, and this last one here is really the crown jewel of my manual collection. It's the Power of Choice, the Science of Neuroassociative Conditioning, Tony's certification training, which was done in Maui, Hawaii. I believe this is from 1987, and you'll see here in the front some of the neuroassociative conditioning cards that many of these principles are ones that Tony still uses today, and then the content throughout the manual. It's fun to see how this content has evolved over the years as well. Here we have some other manuals, more recent ones obviously, and some of them again from other participants. Next we have Tony's personal journal. This was something that was given out to Platinum Partners one year. It includes Tony's personal notes from early in his career as he was just forming a lot of his initial ideas and principles. This is one of my favorite things. I love to read Tony's thoughts and what he was thinking as he was creating these amazing programs. All right, so now we've got all the programs that Tony's ever created. We've got the Power Talk series here, which is one of my favorites. This is the program with Chet Holmes that Tony developed. This is an early Unlimited Power cassette program. This one, Tony looks like Steve Jobs in, and the font was kind of Apple-like as well. Meetings with the Masters. We've got another Unleash the Power Within. Another Unlimited Power program. This would have been, I believe, one of the infomercial products that Tony was launching early in his career. This is the Results Planner and More Time. This is the predecessor to the Time of Your Life program. Tony had a company back in the day that actually made planners called Geodex. And if you've seen the Franklin Covey planners, this was Tony's version of that. That was actually a 3-hole punch that was made by that company. I love these summary cards for each of the programs. The Body You Deserve. I have them for several others. For me, the cards are just a great way of practicing the content. These are some early VHS tapes of Tony's programs that were recorded either by Tony's team or by companies that he presented at. It's so much fun to watch these early VHS programs and to see some familiar faces like Joseph McClendon, who is in these as well, and some very familiar speakers like Colin Powell, who came to Business Mastery. Next up, we have a poster for Unleash the Power Within from 2002. We have another poster for Shallow Hal that was given out at the movie premiere. You can see here that Tony has signed it. This is a great movie. If you haven't seen Shallow Hal, it's very funny. It stars Jack Black and Gwyneth Paltrow, and Tony makes several cameos throughout the movie. This is a photo from the premiere of Tony and Sage. This is the famous elevator scene from Shallow Hal. Again, you've got to see the movie if you haven't already. These are some of my old participant lanyards. I save these and make a small collection of them here. Down below is a picture of Tony from an event that he did in Chicago. You can see that he's signed it as well. There's a photo at the very bottom of Tony and I at a Success Resources event. And here are some photos with people like Michael Singer, Gary Vaynerchuk, Jack Canfield. Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, is really one of my favorites. If you haven't read it, be sure to check it out. There's also a great podcast episode where Michael Singer spoke with Tony. I used to live near Michael and attended his temple. Incredible guy. This is a photo of Tony from a firewalk, I believe, right outside of Madison Square Garden, and it has been turned into a painting, as you can see here. I have a good friend named E.J. Nieves, who's an up-and-coming artist, and kind of gave him an idea of what I was looking for in a firewalking painting. E.J. did an incredible job. I'll put a link to his art in the comments if any of you are interested in checking it out. This is from Tony's 60th birthday celebration, which was held in February of 2020, right before the world changed with COVID. These are some early press photos of Tony. And one of the really interesting things to look at on these press photos are some of these marks that you'll see down here in the corner. So before there was digital photography and print layouts, it was all done by hand. And so people who ran newspapers had to make those little marks. This is a portrait of Tony that was done by a Chinese artist on a page from Awaken the Giant Within. Pretty incredible artwork. Some more press photos from, again, the early 1990s. Here's Tony walking across fire. So very, very cool to see this. Next up, we have the famous "Now I Am the Voice" incantation that you might recognize from Tony's events. Some quotes from Tony. Now, I have quite the random assortment of other things that I've saved from events, like water bottles. I don't know why I have this huge collection of water bottles. These are the Energy Muse necklaces that you'll see Tony wearing at many events. These are ones that I've purchased myself. I've also been given a few by friends and family over the years as gifts. This is a pen that's signed by Tony. Event hats from events as early as UPW 1998. We've got Mastery University hats here as well. Here's obviously some more recent ones from events. Really cool to see, again, how these styles have changed over the years, and just a cool collection of hats. I really want to give a shout out to a friend of mine named David. David, I'll tag you in this video so you know who you are. But David attended many of these events and was kind enough to sell me many of these hats. Next up, we have some of my personal Black Clover hats. I like this last one because it's my school colors, but this is really the crown jewel of my hat collection. These are the Tony Robbins signature Live Lucky hats. Each year, Tony comes out with a new one of these, usually around year end. And you can see that I have, I think, every one of them, except for the most recent one, which has just come out for 2023. So if anybody watching this has one of the 2023 hats, let me know. These are some of the shirts from past events. We've got one that has the kind of a Harley Davidson looking shield on it there. UPW crew shirt from the 90s. We've got some other crew shirts. The ones at the very top you'll notice are, I think, among the earliest. They're from, again, the Firewalk Experience. And I just love how retro looking some of these are. Pink and black. And there's another one coming up here. You'll see at the very end of this row that's actually teal and pink. So again, very 90s retro. I really like that kind of stuff. That's cool to see. We've got some Mastery University apparel here from 1992 from Hawaii, and a shirt from the World Tour, a crew shirt that I think many of you will recognize from the early 2000s. Here's a duffel bag from Date with Destiny that was held in Fiji, also in 1992. Here's a signed denim jacket that has Tony's Live with Passion written on it as well. Denim, I guess, was pretty big in the 90s. I've got quite a few of these denim jackets in all different colors and shades of denim. This is one that has the star on it, and again, live with passion inside of it. I don't usually wear these out in public, but this is my favorite Tony jacket. It's the Power and Passion World Tour, 1993 to 1994, and you've got all the cities on there that Tony held events in. This is my favorite Tony jacket. These are some shirts from my collection, nothing too special here. You might recognize the most recent crew shirt there. Some of my favorite jackets. Now, in the area of jackets, this is a jacket that's very special to me. This is one that I wear while I'm on the fire team. I've had the pleasure of serving on the fire team at Tony's events, and these are a couple of pictures from there. This is the fire hood that I wear when I'm working in the pit, and you can see that I've written on the inside of it each of the events that I've been on fire team for, the most recent one being at the bottom there, West Palm Beach 2022. I am really excited and looking forward to my first international event, crewing on the fire team in Birmingham, UK, coming up in 2023. This is my Ultimate Fire Team jacket, which is really my most prized possession. It's the thing that I feel most honored to have gotten. The year that I got it, my wife made this little ornament for me. The Ultimate Fire Team jacket is given out to Ultimate Fire Teamers, people who have done a lot of events. The little red thing you saw there was a bag of coals from a firewalk. I've also got some stuff here that's just related to sort of firewalking history. This is a 1902 pamphlet from the U.S. government about the firewalk in Tahiti. This is an ad related to firewalking. Here you see some more Fijian firewalking. There's a lot of great books on firewalking. This one is about the ceremony in Greece. Many people think of it as an island tradition, but firewalking has been practiced all over the world. Tolly Burkan, or Tolly the Giant, was really one of the first people to bring firewalking to the U.S., and I believe that's who Tony learned firewalking from. I've got a book here that was actually signed by Tolly called Dying to Live. Tolly's written several books, but this one in particular is kind of his life story, and would really recommend it to you. If you go on YouTube, you can actually find some of Tolly's early seminar videos. Here's a VHS of one called Dancing with Fire. Definitely recommend checking out some of those. We've also got Dale Carnegie, who you may know as the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is an early signature of his on a book plate. Dale Carnegie was someone who also put together public speaking courses, and this was a little memento given out to someone who won for best speech during one of the courses. This is a book signed by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who you may know as the author of The Power of Positive Thinking, someone who was very influential in the early personal development sort of movement. We've got other books up there signed by people like Zig Ziglar, Stephen Covey, Dr. Wayne Dyer, who you'll see more of in a moment, and many more. This is a little pamphlet from Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. These little pamphlets were pretty common in the early 1900s. This is a record by Earl Nightingale called The Strangest Secret. It was actually one of the best-selling personal development records of all time. This is a course called Lead the Field that Earl Nightingale put out, and you can see that it includes records, and in between the records, little personal development exercises. So even before Tony's cassettes, there were these early forms of personal development courses that were available. All right, so we've also got a little matchbook from the Earl Nightingale restaurant. Many people don't know that Nightingale actually had a restaurant here in Florida, and I was surprised to find that out and to find this little memento from the restaurant. These are some books by some of the people that we've just talked about: Earl Nightingale, Dale Carnegie, and several others. Now, we've got quite a few books in our home. Between my wife and I, we have about 3,000 books. Most of mine are personal development, as you can see. These are a couple of bookends that someone gave me. They got these on their trip to Namali, Tony's resort in Fiji. They're my favorite bookends. These are my cassette programs from other people, including Brian Tracy, Wayne Dyer. You can see There's Jay Abraham, who might be a familiar name to those of you in the Tony environment. And there's Jim Rohn's famous weekend seminar, which I have several of the manuals and journals from as well. Again, these are all cassette programs, but I've listened to them many times and get something new each time I listen to them. Here's a little booklet signed by Jim Rohn, who was, again, if you don't know, Jim Rohn was really Tony's biggest early influence in his career. I've got a lot of books here by Dr. Wayne Dyer. I'm a big fan of his as well. Here's a couple of books that he's signed. This is a book that he wrote called You'll See It When You Believe It. And this little copy isn't particularly special, but this is his manuscript for that book. I bought this off of one of Dr. Dyer's friends. You can see here in the bottom, it says that this is a manuscript for the William R. Murrow Company. And it's dated there. And again, very special to have a manuscript that Dr. Wayne Dyer would have held in his hands and would have been editing with throughout the process. So pretty cool. You don't see that very often. This is my Jack Canfield collection. Here's an early VHS tape of Jack Canfield. You might have seen a little photo earlier of Jack and myself at an event. I'm a big admirer of Jack. If you don't know, he's the author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, but he also wrote this book called The Success Principles. There's Jack and I at an event a few years ago. I actually had the pleasure of not only meeting Jack, but also meeting a gentleman named Peter Vegso. Peter was the first publisher to recognize Jack and to launch his career with the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Jack tells a story where Peter signed his first $1 million check to him and signed it with a smiley face. And you can see that little smiley face that's still in Peter's signature. There's Peter and I at his horse farm a number of years ago. Here's a book by both Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone called Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. W. Clement Stone was actually Jack Canfield's earliest influence in the same way that Jim Rohn influenced Tony. So again, each of these people have their influence. These are a couple of books by Bandler and Grinder, who were the originators of the neuro-linguistic programming, which is a framework that Tony used early in his career. When I was in high school, I wrote a 20-page report about NLP because I was into Tony, and no one understood anything about what I was talking about, but I still have that report. This is a book signed by Werner Erhard. Next to Tony, I think the biggest part of my collection really is things from Werner Erhard from the Erhard Seminar Training and later the Landmark Forum. Here's a picture signed by Werner Erhard. Werner is still alive today. He was a personal development speaker in the 1970s. Very unique style and way of speaking. You can hear some of his seminars on YouTube videos. I actually had a coworker a few years ago who was friends with an employee of Werner Erhard's, and that's really what got me into understanding his content. This is a little book that, believe it or not, is the hardest thing to have found in my personal development collection. It took me about 5 years to buy one of these at a reasonable price. They usually go for around $400. And this little book was given out to graduates of EST, and it's just a collection of little poems or aphorisms that Werner Erhard put together. I've got some personal correspondence between Werner and several of his staff members and people within the EST organization. Just absolutely fascinated by this gentleman's work. This is a report that Werner and EST put together on the effectiveness of his training. So they sent a survey out to all of the people who had gone through EST and were able to, really show how this impacted their lives. These are graduate forums. These are little newsletters that were sent out to people who had taken the course. Here we have Werner's signature. Again, another set of personal letters between Werner and people who had taken the seminar. Someone that Werner had a very close relationship with and interviewed a number of times was Buckminster or Bucky Fuller. Buckminster Fuller was a famous architect and philosopher who was most famous for inventing the geodesic dome. So if you've been to Epcot at Disney World and you've seen the big dome, that was actually Buckminster Fuller's invention. There's a great YouTube video. It's a several-hour-long interview between Bucky Fuller and Werner Erhard. I definitely recommend checking it out. Here's an EST membership card. Here's something that was used in one of the advanced trainings called Who Are You? By Mr. Harding, who was a philosopher based in the UK. This would have been laid on each of the participants' chairs, and you can see on the back side of it, here it actually says, "Do not open until instructed." So this was used in the EST seminars. Here's some books on EST if any of you are interested in reading more. A number of these are easily found on Amazon for a reasonable price. Others, however, are a little more rare and hard to find. It's amazing that some of these little trade paperbacks, like this one, used to sell for 50 cents, and now they go for $100, $200, or even $300 on eBay. But it's great to really understand EST from the personal perspectives of some of the people that went through the course. So that's basically it. That's my personal development collection so far. Thank you so much for watching. If any of you have items related to any of the people that you've seen, I'd be interested in buying them, so please reach out to me. I'll put my info down in the comments. Thanks so much.